So you work for one place your entire life. You trust in that entity. In their case, it was the government. The government is going to help you with benefits. Then once you go below into the millennials and the generations below them, it didn't really work out so well. So for many of those people, there will never be a possibility of owning a home. To figure out how to make money, I looked at the wealthy. I said, what do they do? How do they make money? How do they invest their money? How do they create structures that hide their money and legally hide their money? That's the kind of thinking that the 1% will always do. They'll try to get out of the system and say, what's the hack? What's the loophole? So I can achieve what I want to achieve, but not necessarily follow the system. Welcome back to the Jerz Way. Today we are going to talk about how to live like the 1%. And I guess the starting point here is, what exactly does that even mean? And the best way I can explain this, I will use my parents as an example. So I grew up, for those of you who don't know me, don't know my backstory, both my parents were professors. And I grew up upper middle class, I would say. But my parents were very much traditional wage slaves, you'd basically say. So both of them were professors. They had good government jobs, and they believed in the system. For them, it was all about the system and believing from the time that they were kids that they had to get good grades so they could get into a good university. And then after university, they went to graduate school so that they could get good jobs, doing what they wanted to do, which was in the academic field. And then they bought into the system. So you work for one place your entire life. You trust in that entity. In their case, it was the government. The government is going to help you with benefits. And it was all about the benefits, the health care, the Social Security, the pensions that you get. Now, my parents are older, and for them, it actually worked out pretty well. I was having a conversation with them the other day, and they did all right for themselves. They are both well into retirement at this point, and they're old, they're elderly. Health's not the best anymore, but they did quite well for themselves. They were able to purchase a house that's gone up exponentially in value. The system really worked for people like them. They were baby boomers. And then came along my generation, Generation X. And even for my generation, I would say most of the rhetoric, you get good grades, you get a good job, you believe in the system. I think it worked out in large part, especially for the older portion of Generation X. Then you get to myself, younger Generation X, and then once you go below into the millennials and the generations below them, it didn't really work out so well. So for many of those people, there will never be a possibility of owning a home. These systems, you work hard for the healthcare. Well, the healthcare systems are broken. So you work for this health insurance that you can't even use. Same thing with pensions. Social Security might still be around in some form when I hit another 20 years or so. Maybe, maybe not. But certainly for people younger than me, it's not going to be there. There's not going to be pensions. There's not going to be Social Security. So why should you believe in this system? And then if you're not going to believe in this system, what is there? How do you get to this 1% who basically can travel around the world, do what they want, live life on their own terms? So the interesting thing for me, from the time I was a little kid, I said, this is bullshit. I figured out a story I like to tell. I listened to my parents when I was young. So when I was in elementary school, early middle school, I was a student. I studied. I did good. And then right around 7th grade, I think that's what, 11, 12 years old, I remember one day I said, well, if I study my ass off, I get all A's. But if I don't really do anything, if I just sort of float through, I get some A's and I get mostly B's, and that's pretty good. So why am I gonna waste my time studying and following the system, which I know won't work? I knew from the time I was a little kid, this notion of investing in retirement accounts and following the rules was just a bunch of bullshit. So I engineered my life from a young age to figure out how to make money. I looked at the wealthy. I said, what do they do? How do they make money? How do they invest their money? How do they create structures that hide their money and legally hide their money, so that they can live life on their terms? And I had a couple great mentors when I was younger, and I've really, certainly over the last 15, 20 years, structured my life in a way I can do exactly what I want when I want. And really more than the money, more than the monetary aspect of being in the 1%, that's the key. Being able to do what you want when you want. Because at a certain point, it doesn't matter if you've got a billion, 100 million. Once you get into the multi-millions, yes, it's nice to make money and make more money, but what it really comes down to is, can you do what you want when you want? And as long as you can say that, I would argue you are in the 1%, because a lot of the people who are the richest people in the world, we're talking the billionaire class, they can't answer yes to that question. So there's something to the concept of 1% that goes beyond, simply monetary, simply money, simply the monetary side. And to me, yes, money's important. We have to make money. We have to figure out a way to make money outside of the system. And there are many ways to do that. I have had many businesses over the years in different fields. And I've always sort of realized that you most likely aren't going to be able to do the same thing forever. So you have to be flexible. You have to understand markets. And you have to stick at what it is you're trying to do. And I would argue, if you stick with something for a long enough time, I don't care what it is, you'll figure out how to make money. Most people never get beyond the 2, 3 months. And that's why most people say, oh, that's for the rich people. I can't figure out how to start a business. I can't figure out how to make money without getting one of these traditional jobs. They're just not putting in the repetitions. They're not sticking with it. And one trait you will always find that the 1% has in common is their ability to go with the flow and to stick with it. So they don't quit when things get hard. They stick with it. And that is the trait that allows them to be in the 1%. More important, again, than I would say money is being able to stick with something to be able to make the money. And then beyond that, it's structure. So if you look at your typical wage slave, you look at somebody in the US with a W-2 or the equivalent in an EU country who's going to work, who's paying 40, 50, 60% tax, they're never going to get ahead, because the system is designed not to let you get ahead. What does the system say? Sidetrack. I had a couple clients actually over the last couple of days who've talked to me about getting mortgages. So their priority is structuring their life to not damage the possibility of being able to get a mortgage at some hypothetical time in the future. And in both cases, I was very clear with them. You've got to really look at your priorities. Is it worth paying 40, 60% tax on hundreds of thousands of dollars in income so you can qualify for a mortgage. Why not structure your life to avoid paying that tax so you can pay cash for a house in a few years? And that's the kind of thing that's the kind of thinking that the 1% will always do. They'll try to get out of the system and say, "What's the hack? What's the loophole so I can achieve what I want to achieve, but not necessarily follow the system?" And for me, what I will help you do, what I've helped thousands of clients over the years do, is create those systems and those structures. So, what does that mean? As far as a structure, well, if you're going to go outside that wage system, you're going to have a business structure. How do you get paid? Where are those bank accounts? Are those structures in your name? Are they in somebody else's name? And then how do you create structures flexible enough so as your wealth increases, as your priorities change, your structures change with you? And one thing that I do very differently than almost anybody else in the space, I'm trying to find out where you are now and what structures you need to optimize your life today and where you want to go eventually and how to optimize from the point you're at to the point you want to go. And that is what you need to do if you wanna get from where you are here to where you wanna be. And most people just miss that, especially I think the people who do things similar to what I do, they're in it to sell you something today. They don't care what happens 1 year, 5 years, 10 years down the road. I try to actually build the relationships so that we can take the structure we create for you today and make it work for you, not just today, but over many years to come, and then modify that structure as we need to. And ultimately, again, the goal here of being in the 1% is being able to do what you wanna do when you wanna do it. And if you can honestly look in the mirror and say, "Yes, I can do exactly what I want when I wanna do it," in most cases, you've achieved that and you've made it to the 1%.